Hello everyone, welcome back to Dark Untold. Tonight, we journey deep into the Appalachian Mountains, where the line between the living and the dead fades beneath the whispering pines. Out here, campfires burn low, shadows move when no one's watching, and sometimes the forest calls you by name. This is 8 new most disturbing true Appalachian Mountains camping horror stories. Prepare to face restless spirits that wander abandoned trails, cursed graves hidden beneath layers of moss, and unseen eyes watching from the dark timber. You may hear footsteps circling your tent, or voices that sound far too familiar. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't follow the whispers in the woods. I was told never to whistle in the woods after dark. My grandfather used to say the trees remember every sound, and sometimes something else whistles back. I didn't believe him, not really. Not until that winter in Black Hollow. My name's Jacob Myers. I'm a wildlife photographer based out of Asheville, North Carolina. I make a living tracking animals, documenting the forgotten corners of Appalachia from magazines and research groups. It's lonely work, but it's quite peaceful, even. That's what drew me to Black Hollow in the first place. Quiet. The forest had a reputation. Sure, hunters went missing there every few years. Locals claimed it was cursed land, haunted by a creature born from starvation and madness, the Wendigo. I'd heard the story a dozen times growing up, always told in that low, warning tone old folks used to scare kids into staying home after dark. The Wendigo, they said, was once a man who resorted to cannibalism in the dead of winter, cursed to wander forever, starving, its hunger never sated. It mimics voices. It smells of decay, and once it speaks your name, you're already lost. I thought it was just folklore, but I needed photos real, untouched wilderness shots. So in late January, when the snowpack was deep and the air hung thick with the kind of stillness only Appalachia can hold, I set out into Black Hollow alone. The trail faded about 5 miles in, swallowed by snow and mist. The trees were so dense, the sunlight barely reached the ground, and the silence had a weight to it, like the forest was holding its breath. I found a clearing by a half-frozen creek and set up camp. My breath fogged the air in steady clouds as I pitched the tent, each exhale sounding too loud in the hush. By sundown, the woods went black. No wind, no insects, no cracking branches, just the sound of the creek trickling under a thin sheet of ice. I sat by the fire, reviewing my camera footage. That's when I heard it for the first time. A voice, distant, barely there. Jacob, I froze. The sound came from the direction of the creek. It was faint soft, like someone calling from far off. I waited, thinking maybe it was the wind, or an echo. Then again clearer this time. Jacob, my skin prickled. The voice sounded familiar too familiar. It was my brother, Daniel. But Daniel had been dead for 3 years. I told myself I was tired. The forest plays tricks at night, especially when you're alone. I stoked the fire, trying to drown the unease in the crackle of flames. But that smell hit me out of nowhere, like wet rot, decaying meat. It came with the wind, if there even was wind. The next morning, I found footprints near the creek. Not mine. They were huge, elongated. The toes stretched unnaturally long, like claws dragging through the snow. They started right at the edge of the frozen water and stopped about 10 feet from my tent, as if whatever it was had been standing there, watching me. I wanted to believe it was a bear, or maybe some trick of the ice. But bears don't walk on 2 legs, and the prints weren't spaced like a 4-legged animal's. They were too straight, too deliberate. I packed my camera and followed them anyway. That was my first mistake. The prints led deeper into the hollow, where the trees leaned close together, like old men whispering secrets. The deeper I went, the colder it got, not normal cold, but a still, dead cold that seeped through my gloves and into my bones. Even my breath felt heavier, like the air itself resisted being drawn in. After an hour, I found something half buried in the snow. A deer carcass, or what left of one. The flesh was torn off in long, uneven strips, and the bones were snapped open, the marrow scooped clean. The snow around it was black with dried blood. Something about it didn't look right. The rib cage was twisted inward, almost crushed, like something had folded the body from the outside. I crouched to take a picture, and that's when I smelled it again, that same sickly, sweet rot. Then I heard the whistle. 3 notes. High, low, high. Coming from somewhere behind me. I turned, but there was nothing, just the trees and that endless white silence. Then again, closer this time. The same pattern. 3 notes. That was when I remembered what my grandfather had said. Never whistle in the woods. Never answer back. Because when you do, the forest remembers your sound, and something else might return it. I left the carcass behind and went back to camp. But when I got there, the tent was collapsed, torn straight through the middle, like a knife had gutted it. My sleeping bag was shredded, my food gone. The prints were back to circling the campsite. I ran. I didn't even pack up my gear. I grabbed my camera, my flashlight, and bolted toward where I thought the trail had been. But the snow had changed everything. The forest didn't look the same. The trees were too close, too tall, and every direction looked wrong. The sun dipped behind the ridge, and shadows swallowed the hollow. I found a fallen tree and crouched under it as the last of the daylight disappeared. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. I banged it against my knee, but nothing. The darkness pressed in like a living thing. Then came the voice again. Jacob? Closer now. Behind me. Jacob, it's me, Danny. I clamped my hands over my ears. You're not real, I whispered. You're not real. The voice came again, breaking, pleading. Jacob, please. I'm hurt. I need help. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to. My brother's voice. I could hear the pain in it, the same way he'd sounded that night we crashed the truck when we were kids. But I knew Daniel was dead. I'd seen his body after the accident. Still, something in me needed to look. I turned my head just enough to see through the slits of the fallen tree. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a man. Tall, thin, standing at the edge of the clearing. But then the light shifted, and I realized it wasn't standing. It was bent, like its bones didn't fit together right. Its skin hung in strips, gray and tight like old leather stretched over sticks. Its head tilted too far, and from its mouth came a sound like someone trying to breathe through broken glass. And its eyes, those glowing, pale yellow eyes, locked right on me. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The thing stood there for what felt like hours, just sniffing the air. Then it opened its mouth wider, and my brother's voice came out again. Help me, Jacob, please. My stomach turned. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was a recording wrong, distorted, too slow. Like it was learning how to speak. When I finally dared to move, I crawled deeper into the hollow log and waited. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, it was dawn. The snow had stopped falling, and everything was quiet again. Too quiet. I stepped out, my legs numb, and started walking any direction. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. Hours passed. My stomach ached from hunger, and my throat burned from thirst. I reached a ridge where I thought I could see the highway beyond the trees. My heart actually lifted for a second, until I saw something glinting in the snow. My camera, the same one I dropped when I ran. Only now it was lying there on top of fresh snow, the strap perfectly coiled beside it, as if someone had set it down gently, waiting for me to find it. I should have kept walking. I know that now. but instinct took over. I picked it up and scrolled through the last few photos, desperate for proof, for something that made sense. There were shots of the deer carcass, the footprints, the creek. Then, one more, a photo I hadn't taken. It was me, sleeping, inside my tent. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. That's when I started running again. I don't know for how long. The forest blurred around me, and every tree looked the same. I could hear footsteps now, heavy, dragging ones following just far enough behind that I couldn't see. Then came the breathing. Slow, wet, ragged. It was right beside me. I turned, swinging my flashlight wildly, but the beam only caught a flicker of movement, bones and frost, and a mouth that opened far too wide. The next thing I remember is the sound. That horrible, piercing shriek that wasn't human. It ripped through the air, and every hair on my body stood on end. I don't know how I made it out. The next morning, a ranger found me wandering near the old logging road, frostbitten and half-conscious. They said I was mumbling something about voices and loans. They found my campsite too, but no footprints, no carcass, no Wendigo. Just the torn tent and the faint smell of rot that wouldn't fade. That was 3 months ago. I've tried to move on, to tell myself it was hypothermia, exhaustion, hallucination. But then, 2 nights ago, I got an email. No subject line. No sender. Just one attachment. A photo. It was me. In bed, asleep, and in the corner of the room, just barely visible in the dark, 2 glowing yellow eyes. They told me never to camp alone in Shady Valley. If you hear whispering outside your tent, the old ranger warned, don't unzip it, don't speak, and whatever happens, don't look. I thought it was just another campfire story, the kind locals tell to spook outsiders. But now, sitting here in the dim glow of my lantern, with my hands shaking and something wet drying under my nails, I know every word was true. My name is Daniel Price. I'm 33, a wildlife photographer for a small magazine out of Knoxville. I've spent years chasing bears through the Smokies, crouching for hours in cold mud just to catch a fox's shadow at dawn. I've never been afraid of the woods, but the valley, Shady Valley, felt different from the moment I rolled in. It's tucked between 2 ridges in northeastern Tennessee, a long hollow filled with fog and stagnant ponds where even the frogs sound uncertain. Locals call it the place where the light forgets to reach. I came here in late October, right before the first frost. The assignment was simple: document autumn wildlife migration along the Appalachian corridor. I planned to spend 2 nights in the valley before heading north. When I stopped at a small gas station in the town of Mountain City to stock up, the cashier, an older man with milky eyes, froze when I mentioned Shady Valley. Don't camp there, he said, voice low. Not this time of year, I laughed, thinking he was just superstitious. He didn't laugh back. I should have listened. By the time I reached the valley, dusk had already turned the treetops black. The place was eerily still, like the woods were holding their breath. Even the crickets were quiet. I found an old campsite near the creek flat ground, a ring of stones and a rusted metal sign half hidden by vines. I wiped the dirt from it, expecting it to say something like "no fires beyond this point." But the letters were carved instead of painted, crude and uneven. Don't stay after dark. IT? Where's what IT takes? I told myself it was a prank. Probably some edgy teenagers. I pitched my tent, lit a small fire, and ate dinner while editing photos on my camera. The air grew colder fast, heavy with the smell of wet leaves and rot, the kind of damp that clings to your clothes. Around 10, the fog rolled in, thick as smoke. My firelight turned orange-gray, flickering like a dying bulb. That's when I heard it, the first sound. It wasn't footsteps exactly, but something dragging. Slow, uneven, like a heavy tarp pulled across gravel. It came from the tree line behind my tent. Then silence. Then again she. Scrape. She. Scrape. I froze, listening. Probably just a deer, I thought. Maybe a bear sniffing around for scraps. I picked up my flashlight and called out, "Hey, get out of here." The dragging stopped. Then, faintly, from the fog, came a sound that made my skin crawl. It was a voice. A man's voice, soft and strained, saying my name. ... Daniel ... double quotes. My chest went cold. I didn't know anyone out here. I hadn't told anyone exactly where I'd camped. The voice came again, closer this time, clearer. Daniel ... Help me ... I turned the flashlight toward the trees. The beam caught fog and branches, nothing else. Who's there? I called. Silence. Then something moved just outside the light's reach, a tall shadow, thin and swaying, its outline wrong somehow. It looked like it was wearing something loose and torn, fluttering slightly. I stepped backward toward my tent, my heartbeat loud in my ears. "If you need help, come into the light," I shouted. The figure tilted its head, and then it whispered, in the exact tone of my own voice, "If you need help, come into the light." My stomach dropped. The thing was mimicking me. Perfectly. I dove into my tent, zipped it shut, and killed the light. My breathing sounded too loud. For what felt like hours, I listened to that dragging sound circle the tent, pausing every few minutes. Once, I heard something brush against the fabric slowly, deliberately. Then, just as I started to doze, I felt a tap on my shoulder from outside. Light, like a single fingertip pressing through the nylon. Tap, tap, tap. I bit my tongue to keep from making a sound. After a while, it stopped. I didn't sleep. When dawn came, the woods were silent again. No fog, no footprints, nothing. But when I stepped outside, my camera, which I'd left on the log by the fire, was gone. In its place was a long strip of something pale and dry, curled like parchment. It took me a moment to realize what it was. Skin. I packed up fast and hiked back toward the road. The trail was quiet except for the wind. About half a mile from camp, I found my camera sitting in the middle of the path. The strap was slick with something dark. I picked it up and turned it on. The battery was nearly dead, but one photo had been taken during the night. It showed my tent from about 10 feet away. And behind it, half visible in the fog, was that same tall shape. Its face was wrong, like it had too many seams. I should have left then. God, I should have just kept walking until I hit pavement. But curiosity or stupidity got the better of me. I wanted proof. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, so I went back that night. This time, I set up motion sensors and strung a few small cameras around the camp. If it was an animal or a person, I'd catch it. I kept the fire burning low, waited with my lens trained on the woods. Midnight came. The fog rolled in again. My sensors stayed quiet, no movement. Then I heard it, the dragging sound, closer than before. She ... scrape ... she ... scrape. I pointed my flashlight, but the beam just bounced off the fog. The sound grew louder, circling me. Then something brushed my hair from behind. I spun, but nothing was there. My skin prickled, every instinct screaming that I wasn't alone. The first sensor went off a red blink on my monitor, behind the tent. I ran to check the feed. For a moment, the screen was static. Then it cleared, showing something standing there. It looked human, barely. Its body was covered in skin that didn't match patches lighter and darker, stitched crudely together like leatherwork. Its face was smooth, featureless at first, until it shifted. The skin rippled, reshaping itself into a man's face mine. It smiled. Then the feed went black. I stumbled backward, tripping over my gear. My flashlight flickered and died. The dragging sound surrounded me now. She, scrape, dot dot, she, dot 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 dot. My breath fogged in front of me, though the air wasn't that cold. I grabbed my camera and snapped photos blindly in every direction, the flash cutting through the fog. Each burst of light showed glimpses bare feet, long fingers, skin stretched too tight over bones, faces that looked half-finished. The last flash revealed it right in front of me. Inches away, its eyes were mine. Its mouth split open in a smile that reached too far, showing no teeth, just dark, wet muscle beneath stolen flesh. Then it lunged. I don't remember falling, only the feeling of something rough and cold pinning me down. It smelled like rot and wet copper. I felt hands know, claws pressing against my face, tracing the line of my jaw, my neck, as if measuring me. Then a sharp pain as something hooked beneath my skin, tugging. I screamed. It stopped. The weight lifted. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. I ran. I don't know how long or in which direction, but somehow I made it back to my truck. The door was open, keys gone. My reflection in the glass startled me. My cheek was bleeding, 2 long scratches trailing down toward my collarbone, like something had tried to peel. I drove all night until I saw the lights of town. I went straight to the sheriff's office, babbling about a creature, about skin. They didn't believe me until I showed them the photos. But when we pulled the memory card upon their computer, every image after midnight was gone, wiped clean. A week later, a ranger called me. They'd gone to the site and found my first campsite torn apart, my tent shredded, my equipment gone, and near the creek they found a body, or what was left of one. It didn't have skin. They never identified it. I moved out of Tennessee after that. Tried to forget, but it's followed me. Sometimes I catch my reflection in a window, and for a split second, the face staring back isn't quite mine. The eyes blink a fraction too late. The mouth twitches wrong. A month ago, I started hearing the sound again. She dot 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 scrape dot 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 scrape outside my apartment. Always around 3 a.m. last night, I woke to find my window open, the latch torn off. On the sill was a single piece of torn fabric from my old tent, and something else. A strip of skin. Mine. I know it's coming for me. The skin taker doesn't stop. It doesn't sleep. It collects what it likes and wears it until it falls apart. The ranger was right. You shouldn't camp in Shady Valley. But if you ever do, if you ever hear something whisper your name through the fog, don't answer. Don't look. Because if it sees your face, it'll never need to find another. They say the water at the Devil's Bathtub never gives back what it takes. Locals warn you not to swim after sunset, not to touch the surface when the air turns cold, and above all, never to answer if something beneath the water calls your name. One wish I had listened. My name is Adam Walker. I'm 31, a park ranger with the Virginia Department of Conservation. I've worked these mountains for nearly a decade, hiked hundreds of trails, crossed dozens of rivers, and I thought I understood the land. But the Devil's Bathtub down in Scott County was different. It looked peaceful, even perfect. A turquoise pool carved into the limestone by centuries of flowing water, hidden deep within the Appalachian foothills. But the place had a reputation, one older than any park map. The locals said the water wasn't natural, that it was a doorway. I never believed in that kind of talk. But that changed in the summer of 2022. It was mid-July, and I'd been called to investigate a missing person report, 2 campers who'd gone swimming at the bathtub and never came back. Their friends had called it in after finding their gear abandoned on the trail. By the time I arrived, the sun was sinking behind the ridgeline, staining the forest in copper light. The air was thick with humidity, the smell of moss and wet rock hanging heavy. The Devil's Fork Trail wound through dense woods before dropping down into a gorge where the stream widened into that infamous pool. The sound of running water echoed off the stone walls. When I reached the clearing, the first thing I noticed was how still the place felt. The air temperature dropped sharply, a pocket of cold that didn't match the season. The water itself shimmered like glass, the surface unnaturally smooth, even where the stream should have disturbed it. I found their tent still pitched on the bank, 2 folding chairs, a half-empty bottle of beer, a phone dead. Their shoes were lined up neatly by the edge of the pool, like they'd stepped out of them and walked straight into the water. I radioed it in, gave coordinates, and began my sweep. The water was deeper than it looked, an illusion caused by its clarity. The bottom dropped off sharply into an emerald void. As I shined my flashlight across it, something pale flashed just beneath the surface. My stomach clenched, thinking it might be one of them. But when I crouched for a better look, the shape dissolved, like a reflection breaking apart. That's when I felt it the first touch. A hand. I swear to God, a cold hand brushed against my ankle from under the water. I jerked back so hard I fell onto the rocks, scraping my palms. The ripples spread out in perfect circles, but nothing emerged. The pool went still again. Too still. I should have left right then, but I didn't. I kept telling myself it had to be a fish or a trick of the current. I scanned the area for signs of movement, found nothing. When darkness fell completely, I set up my lantern and decided to camp for the night. The retrieval teams would come in the morning. The forest at night was unnervingly quiet. No frogs, no crickets, just a slow drip of water and the whisper of wind through leaves. Around midnight, as I sat by the fire taking notes, I heard a sound coming from the pool. Not splashing, more like breathing. A faint, wet inhalation rising from the water's surface. I turned toward it, the hairs on my arms lifting. The water rippled outward, slow and deliberate, as if something was surfacing just beneath the center. Then came another sound of voice. It was soft, distant, but clear enough to freeze my blood. Adam? My name, drawn out in a tone that was neither male nor female, neither whisper nor echo, just wrong. I stood, my flashlight trembling in my hand, and called back, "Who's there?" The water stilled. Silence stretched for a long moment. Then another whisper, this time from behind me. "Adam." I spun around, the beam slicing through the trees, but there was nothing there. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. The forest seemed to close in around me, every shadow thick with the suggestion of movement. I backed toward the fire, the only thing that felt real. That's when I saw them. 2 figures standing waist-deep in the water, pale, motionless, facing me. Their skin glistened in the dim light, hair slicked down over their faces. They weren't treading water, they were perfectly still, like rooted in place. The lantern flickered, and for a heartbeat, I saw their eyes, black, glossy, and too wide. "Help us," one of them said. The voice came from both figures at once, mouths moving out of sync, the sound layered like an echo within an echo. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. Every instinct screamed that if I stepped closer, I'd never come back. I raised my flashlight, and the figures vanished, gone in a blink. The surface of the pool smooth as glass again. The cold deepened, cutting straight through my clothes. I threw more wood on the fire, but the flames burned low, no matter how much fuel I fed them. The night stretched endlessly. Every time I started to drift into uneasy sleep, I'd jolt awake at the sound of dripping always closer to my tent, like footsteps made of water. At some point, exhaustion won. When I woke, the first thing I noticed was that my boots were soaked. My sleeping bag was wet up to my knees. I crawled out of the tent and realized the fire pit was flooded. The water from the pool had risen several feet overnight, though the stream feeding it hadn't changed. The pool wasn't overflowing, it was spreading, inching closer to my camp, like something alive. I heard the radio crackle inside the tent. Static, then a faint voice. "Walker, do you copy?" I grabbed it, answering. "This is Walker. I'm still at the bathtub. The water level's risen abnormally possible sinkhole formation. No response, just more static. Then, beneath the static, another sound. That same wet breathing. And then, clear as day. Adam, I dropped the radio. My heart felt like it would burst through my ribs. I backed away, eyes locked on the pool, and that's when I saw the hands. They broke the surface all at once, dozens of them. Pale, skeletal, clawing upward from the depths. They moved without pattern, reaching, groping, their fingers dragging across the rocks as if searching for purchase. I stumbled backward, tripping on the uneven ground. One of the hands shot forward and seized my wrist. The grip was ice cold, solid as iron. I screamed, jerking, kicking, but the hand pulled harder, its strength unnatural. The skin felt rubbery, slick, like the flesh of something long dead. Another hand clamped onto my boot. I could feel my body sliding toward the edge, my heels digging into the mud. Desperation took over. I grabbed the fire poker from beside the coals and swung down hard. The metal connected with something solid, and the hand recoiled, dissolving into the water with a hiss like steam. The others retreated with it, vanishing below the surface. I didn't stop running until I reached the tree line. My lungs burned, my heart hammering. When I finally dared to look back, the pool was perfectly calm again, the reflection of the sky dancing across it as if nothing had happened. The rescue team found me the next afternoon, wandering half a mile from the site, drenched and shaking. I told them what I saw, but they chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, maybe toxic algae hallucinations. They dredged the pool and found nothing, no bodies, no remains. Just debris, a few pieces of camping gear, and a phone sealed in a waterproof case. That phone belonged to one of the missing campers. Its screen was cracked, but it powered on. The last video recorded was time-stamped the night they vanished. It showed the two of them standing by the water, laughing, holding a GoPro. The man joked, "If the devil's in here, maybe he'll pull me under." Then he jumped in. The video cut abruptly after 6 seconds of screaming and splashing. When the image came back, the camera lay on the rocks, tilted toward the water. In the final frame, before it went dark, a pale hand surfaced slowly, fingers splayed, reaching toward the lens. I was transferred out of Scott County 2 weeks later. I asked for it, though I never told them why. Now every time I close my eyes, I feel that grip again, the cold, the weight, the pull. I can't take baths anymore. I can barely shower without panic clawing up my throat. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I hear it again. The sound of slow, deliberate dripping, like water pooling at my feet. There's a saying around those parts. The devil's bathtub doesn't drown you, it keeps you. I think it's true, because no matter how far I've gone, I can feel the water still pulling, waiting, and someday I know it'll take me back. They told me not to camp past the second bend of the Red River, not after sunset. They said if you see a campfire burning in the woods with no voices, no movement, just walk the other way. Don't stop, don't call out, don't even look too long, because something might look back. I thought it was just another backwoods ghost story, a local warning to keep tourists from wandering too far off the trails. I was wrong. I should have listened. My name's Daniel Mercer. I work as a freelance nature photographer, mostly for regional magazines and travel blogs. I've hiked across Kentucky for years, chasing early morning mist shots and rare bird captures. Last fall, in late October, I decided to do a photo series of Red River Gorge at night campfire scenes, moonlight over the sandstone cliffs, maybe even a time-lapse of the forest canopy swaying against the stars. I'd been there a dozen times, but never alone, and never after dark. This trip was supposed to be peaceful, a reset from the chaos of city life. It was anything but peaceful. I started out mid-afternoon, hiking in from the main trailhead. The woods smelled of wet leaves and damp earth, that cold autumn scent that makes you aware of how far the sun is falling. The trail twisted between towering pines and narrow rock corridors. I passed a few day hikers heading out, one older man with a fishing rod and a gray dog. He nodded at me, but didn't smile. "You camping out here tonight?" he asked. I said I was. He stopped walking. "Not past the second bend," he warned. "You see smoke, you turn around." I laughed, tried to play it off, but the way his eyes stayed on me, it wasn't a joke. He didn't move until I promised I'd stay near the main site. I didn't. By sunset, I was deep enough that the sound of traffic was gone. Just the river, whispering over stones. I found a flat spot near a narrow bend in the water, perfect for my tent. That's when I noticed it, the faint glow through the trees, not far off. At first, I thought it was the reflection of the setting sun on rock, but it flickered. Firelight. I figured another group had set up camp nearby. I called out, "Hey there!" No response. I waited, listening for the familiar sounds of campers, voices, laughter, movement, but there was nothing. Just the fire's dim pulse through the trees. I shrugged it off. People keep to themselves out here. I unpacked, set up my tent, and started a small fire of my own. I even thought about walking over later to introduce myself, maybe share a beer. Around 8 p.m., the forest went unnaturally quiet. I don't mean peaceful quiet. I mean dead quiet. No wind, no insects, no river. Just stillness so thick I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I looked up from my campfire and saw the other one again, glowing brighter now. Still no sound. I remember thinking maybe someone had left their fire unattended. So I grabbed my flashlight and started toward it. The walk couldn't have been more than 100 yards, but it felt longer. Every step, the temperature seemed to drop. My breath turned white. The trees leaned in close, branches creaking like old bones. When I finally reached the clearing, I froze. The camp was there, 4 tents, a ring of stones around a dying fire, gear neatly arranged. Backpacks, sleeping bags, shoes lined up in a row. The kind of order that made my skin crawl. It wasn't natural, not for a group of hikers. People are messy when they camp. They leave cups, wrappers, something out of place. But this looked staged, perfect. And there was no one, no voices, no footprints except my own. The fire still burned, though faintly, like it had been tended to not long ago. The smell of wood smoke mixed with something else faint, sour, almost metallic, like burnt meat. I called out again. "Hello?" The forest didn't answer. I circled the tents, shining my light inside one. Empty sleeping bag, another empty too. The third had something in it, though. I knelt and unzipped it slowly. Inside was a pile of clothes, jeans, shirt, socks all folded neatly. But underneath, the fabric was wet. I touched it and jerked my hand back. Sticky, warm, blood. My light flickered. I stumbled back, and that's when I heard a sound that didn't belong in any forest. Laughter. Soft, distant, carried on the wind. It wasn't joyful. It was broken, echoing, like several voices tangled together and out of sync. I spun around, scanning the trees, my flashlight beam darting from trunk to trunk. The laughter faded. Then I heard another sound, footsteps crunching in the leaves, just beyond the glow of my light. I called out, "Who's there?" But my voice cracked halfway. Something moved just at the edge of vision, dark silhouettes shifting between trees. My flashlight stuttered again, and for a split second, I thought I saw shapes standing around me, like faint outlines of people made of mist. I ran. Branches whipped my face as I bolted back toward my camp. My fire was still burning when I burst through the trees, but everything felt wrong. The air felt heavier, like breathing through water. My tent fabric rippled, though there was no wind. I sat down by the fire, heart hammering, trying to convince myself I'd just stumbled across an old abandoned camp. Nothing supernatural about it. Maybe hunters. Maybe rangers. Maybe anything else. That's when I noticed something lying beside my tent that hadn't been there before, a small red cooler. My cooler was blue. This one was old, faded, lid half broken. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photographs. Hundreds of them, water damaged but still clear enough to see. Campers, families, couples all smiling, sitting by fires in this same forest. Some of the photos were decades old. And in every one, just behind the people, in the background of trees and shadows, there was always the faint outline of another figure. Always the same one, standing, watching. I dropped the box, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. That's when the laughter came again, closer this time, circling the clearing. I could hear the shuffle of feet, the snapping of twigs. I grabbed my flashlight, swung it toward the sound and froze. Across the river, the other campsite was lit again. Not dimly this time, fully ablaze, like the people had come back. And I swear to God, I could see figures sitting there now. They looked like silhouettes made of smoke. Outlines of people moving, gesturing, laughing around the fire. But there was no sound, only that same echoing laughter coming from all directions. My instincts screamed to pack up and run, but I couldn't look away. One of the figures stood up. Slowly, it turned its head toward me, though I couldn't see a face. Then the fire at their camp flared white-hot and went out. Darkness. Then came the whispering. Voices layered on top of each other, all around me, speaking words I couldn't understand. My flashlight flickered wildly, catching glimpses tents moving slightly, like something brushing past inside them. My cooler slid across the ground on its own, tipping over, spilling photos into the firelight. Every single one now showed me sitting at my own campfire. I don't remember falling, but I must have blacked out. When I opened my eyes, the world was gray, like dawn. My fire was cold. The cooler was gone. I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare until I looked across the river. There were no tents, no smoke, but the ground was blackened, as if something had burned there during the night. And on the nearest tree, carved deep into the bark, was a message in jagged letters. You were with US. I didn't even pack my gear, just ran until I reached my truck. That was 2 months ago. I haven't gone back since, but something followed me. At night, when the wind picks up, I swear I hear that same distant laughter outside my apartment window. Sometimes I wake up and my camping gear is neatly arranged beside my bed, perfectly lined up, just like that other camp in the woods. The strangest part? A few days ago, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was me, sitting by the fire, taken from the trees. Behind me, figures in the dark, smiling. And the bottom of the photo was burned, just enough to hide their faces. They warned us not to follow any lights after dark in Smoky Gap. If you see a lantern swinging in the woods, the old man at the gas station had said, don't look twice. Don't call out. And whatever you do, don't follow it. He said it so simply, like he was reminding us to lock our doors at night. But I remember the way his hands trembled when he passed me my change, how his cloudy eyes flicked toward the mountains behind me, as though something out there could hear him speaking. My name's Eric Dalton. I'm 31, a freelance photographer who takes road trips across the Appalachian backcountry for travel magazines. My work isn't glamorous half the time. I'm camping in damp woods, chasing half-broken leads about hidden gems or forgotten trails. This time, I was covering the remnants of old mining towns in Virginia's coal country, tracing the ghosts of industry long gone. Smoky Gap was supposed to be one of my stops, a quiet off-map hollow where miners had once dug deep into the mountains. I didn't expect to find much more than rusted tools and old shafts. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not then. I arrived late that afternoon, around 5. The sun was slipping behind the ridges, the sky bruised purple. The air smelled like wet pine and iron. The dirt road twisted up the side of the mountain until it opened into a clearing that might have once been a logging camp. Broken boards, half sunk into moss. A stone fire ring. Piles of shale glittering like black glass in the dying light. It was too quiet, actually. Even the cicadas seemed to have gone still. I parked, set up my small green tent near a fallen log, and started unpacking my gear. My phone had no signal. My camera batteries were full. I remember thinking it would be an early night. The forecast had called for rain. That's when I saw an old mining helmet, half buried in the dirt near the tree line. It was cracked right down the middle, its metal lamp rusted and dead. I crouched, brushing off the dirt, noticing faint scorch marks on the edges. Lightning, maybe? Or an explosion? It looked ancient. I set it on the log, planning to photograph it in the morning, but the thing just sat there in the shadows, staring back at me like an empty skull. As darkness fell, a thin fog rolled through the clearing, low and creeping, curling between the trees like smoke. I lit a small fire, made some coffee, and sat back with my camera beside me, hoping to get long exposures of the mist. That's when I heard it soft at first, like a metal hinge groaning in the wind. Then a faint clink, 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 steady, rhythmic, coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. I froze. It didn't sound like an animal. It was metallic like a chain dragging over stone. I called out once. "Hello? Anyone out there?" The sound stopped. For a moment, only the crackle of my fire answered me. Then clink, clink, clink. Closer this time. I turned off my lantern, letting the darkness close around me. The fog had thickened so much that even the firelight looked weak and jaundiced. That's when I saw a faint glow between the trees. It swayed gently, up and down, as though someone were walking with a lantern. I should have remembered the old man's warning. I should have ignored it. But curiosity is a hell of a thing, especially when you make your living chasing mystery. I grabbed my camera, slung it over my shoulder, and followed the light. The forest was silent, except for my boots crunching over damp leaves. The light ahead bobbed and swayed, always just far enough that I couldn't make out who or what carried it. Every now and then, it would stop, hover, and then move again, as if waiting for me to catch up. I kept walking, deeper and deeper, until the trees grew tight together, the fog thick like milk. My breath came out in clouds, even though it wasn't that cold. At some point, I realized the ground beneath me had changed, from forest soil to something rougher, uneven. I looked down and saw wooden beams half rotted into the earth, leading into a dark opening. A mine entrance. The lantern light flickered just inside. I hesitated. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn back. Abandoned mines collapse all the time. But then I saw movement, a figure, stooped and broad-shouldered, walking slowly deeper into the tunnel. I could see the glow of the lantern swinging from one hand, casting pale orange light against the jagged walls. "Hey," I called out. "Hold up. Are you with the Park Service?" No response. "Hello?" The figure paused. Slowly, it turned. For just a second, I saw him. A miner, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing a torn, soot-black jacket and a shattered helmet with light leaking faintly from the crack. His face was wrong. I couldn't see his eyes, just darkness, a void where his face should have been. And the lantern flickered out. Everything went black. I stumbled backward, tripping over a loose beam, gasping as the ground shifted beneath me. I scrambled toward the forest, heart pounding, hands shaking, until I broke free of the fog and saw my campfire glowing weakly through the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, clutching my flashlight, every creak and rustle making my skin crawl. The woods stayed quiet, as if holding its breath. When dawn came, I packed up, ready to leave. But when I turned to grab my camera bag, I froze. The broken helmet I'd found earlier, it was gone. In its place was a fresh one, not rusted, not cracked. Its metal gleamed faintly in the morning light. I didn't touch it. I just left. But leaving Smoky Gap didn't end it. 2 days later, in a motel near Bristol, I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of metal tapping against glass. Clink, clink, clink. I sat up, heart hammering. The sound came from the window. The curtain swayed slightly, as if something outside had brushed it. I reached for my flashlight, but before I could switch it on, a dim orange glow seeped through the thin motel curtain. I froze. The same flickering, swaying light. I crept forward, hand trembling, and pulled the curtain back an inch. There he was, standing in the parking lot, 20 feet away, the same silhouette from the wood's broad-shouldered, helmet cracked, lantern swaying in one hand. Even from behind the glass, I could see the faint shimmer of heat distortion around him, like air warping above fire. And then, as if sensing me, he turned his head, slowly, deliberately. No face, just a hollow darkness that seemed to swallow the light. I stumbled back, tripping over the knitstand. When I looked again, he was gone. The light had vanished, but the window had a handprint on it, large, smudged with something black. That's when I called the police. They came, checked the parking lot. No footprints, no oil, no evidence anyone had been there. The officer, a local, glanced at me with an odd look. When I told him what I saw, his expression changed completely. Smoky Gap? He asked. Yeah, why? He sighed. You shouldn't have gone up there alone. He told me a story how back in the early 1900s, a gas explosion trapped a crew of miners in Shaft 9. Rescue teams found their lanterns still burning, but the men had been buried alive behind tons of rock. Only one body was ever recovered. The rest were never found. Some say their lights still burn underground, searching for a way out. Others say one miner survived mad, disfigured, wandering the tunnels for days before disappearing. They called him the Lantern Man. That was over 100 years ago. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was fatigue, stress, imagination. But that night, when I turned on my camera to upload photos, something stopped me cold. Every frame I'd taken at Smoky Gap, the fog, the fire, the trees was fine. But in the final photo, the one where I'd turned toward the mine entrance, there was a faint figure standing behind me. Helmet cracked, lantern glowing. He hadn't been there when I took it. That's when I stopped sleeping altogether. I started hearing the clink, clink, clink wherever I went, at gas stations, in hotel rooms, on quiet stretches of highway. Always faint, always distant. I tried blasting music, leaving lights on, even moving to another state for a while. It didn't matter. The sound followed. Sometimes I'd wake up to find a faint orange glow in the corner of the room. Other times I'd see soot prints leading to my bed, fading by morning. Then came the dreams. In them, I'm back in the mine, the air thick with dust and heat. I hear the lanterns hiss, see the walls closing in. I can feel something behind me breathing, waiting. And when I turn, I see that hollow face, that broken helmet, and I hear a voice dry, like wind through stone whisper. You followed the light. Now lead the way. I always wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, my hands cold as ice. A few weeks ago, I decided to go back. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I thought I could make it stop if I faced it. I drove back to Smoky Gap. though every instinct told me not to. The clearing was the same, overgrown, silent, but something was different. The ground where I'd camped was scorched black. My fire ring had melted into slag, and right where my tent had stood, there was a hole in the earth. Circular, perfect, as if something had tunneled up from below. I stood there staring when I heard it again clink. Clink, clink. The fog rolled in fast this time, thicker than I'd ever seen it. The light appeared a head closer, brighter. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then I saw him step out of the mist. The lantern man. His helmet hung in pieces, fused to his skull. His clothes were burned, his skin blackened and cracked, glowing faintly beneath like smoldering coal. The lantern swung from his hand, its flame pulsing in rhythm with the clink of the chain. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The air felt heavy, pressing me down. He stopped a few feet away. The smell of smoke and earth filled my nose. He raised the lantern, and the flame flared bright, illuminating the hollow pit where his eyes should have been. Inside that emptiness, I saw flicker shapes writhing, like hands pressed against glass, trapped in the dark. He lifted one charred hand and pointed toward the mine. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. He took a step closer. The ground trembled. From somewhere deep in the mountain came a low groan, like the earth itself exhaling. And then, beneath his breath, I heard hundreds of voices whispering in unison. "Join us." I don't remember running. I don't remember how I got back to my car, but I woke up in it. Hours later, miles down the road, my windshield smeared with ash. The lantern light still burned faintly in my rearview mirror until dawn. That was 3 nights ago. I haven't slept since. I don't think I can. Because now, no matter where I go, no matter how many lights I leave on, when the world goes quiet, when the night is still, I hear it again. Clink, clink, clink. It's closer every time. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that lantern's glow moving just beyond the darkness, waiting for me to follow it one last time. They say you should never whistle in the Blue Ridge forests after dark. Locals claim the woods remember those sounds, but when you whistle, something out there learns the tune and whistles it back. I used to think it was just one of those Appalachian campfire warnings meant to spook outsiders. But after what I heard that night in late October, I'll never doubt it again. My name is Eric Dalton. I'm 34, a wildlife photographer based out of Asheville, North Carolina. I've spent years trekking through the Appalachians, capturing the quiet, hidden beauty of the mountains. The Blue Ridge Range has always been my favorite. Mist-soaked valleys, the smell of wet pine, that endless ripple of green fading into the horizon. But the deeper you go, the more the forest changes. The air grows heavier, older. The silence starts to feel aware. I'd gone out alone for a 3-day shoot, following a trail near Mount Pisgah, where I'd heard elk were migrating early that year. The first day was uneventful. I set up camp beside a small stream, the kind that whispered softly over smooth stones. My tent faced east, where the morning light would spill through the trees. I cooked beans and rice over my little stove, listened to the hum of insects, and fell asleep to the rhythm of wind rustling through pine needles. It was the kind of peaceful solitude I lived for. The second night, though, that's when I heard it. It was around midnight. The campfire had burned low, and I was sitting outside, adjusting the focus on my camera for some long exposure shots of the stars. The forest was still except for the occasional creak of branches. Then, from somewhere far off in the trees, came a sound so sharp and clean it sliced through the silence. A whistle, just one note high, clear and deliberate. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't wind. It was human, or close enough to be mistaken for one. I froze, my breath fogging in the cold air. At first, I thought maybe it was another camper, but there was no light, no movement, nothing but the echo of that single chilling sound fading into the dark. I waited, counting the seconds, straining to listen. Then, like an idiot, I whistled back. Just one short reply, rising and falling. A reflex more than anything, some mix of curiosity and bravado. The moment the sound left my lips, I regretted it. The echo bounced among the trees and vanished into the night. For a few seconds, there was only silence again. Then faintly, from somewhere much closer now, came the same whistle. It mimicked mine exactly. The sound sent a jolt through my chest. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the woods, but the beam fell only on trunks and branches. My skin prickled as I realized the whistler, whatever it was, had moved. Fast, I told myself it was a prank. Some local kids messing with hikers. But the closest town was 20 miles away, and the trailhead was locked after sunset. No one should have been out there. The forest stayed quiet after that. I climbed into my tent, zipped it tight, and tried to sleep. But every sound, every pop of cooling wood, every shift of wind felt like footsteps. I drifted off sometime before dawn, but not peacefully. When I woke, I found something waiting outside. Footprints. They circled my entire campsite, dozens of them. Bare, thin, elongated, too long to be human, the toes almost claw-like. The impressions weren't deep enough for weight, but spread perfectly around the perimeter of my tent, like someone or something had been pacing all night, watching. I packed up in a hurry, telling myself I'd hike out early. But the trail looked different in daylight, the trees leaning closer, the canopy thicker than I remembered. The further I walked, the quieter everything became. No birds, no wind, not even the hum of insects. The silence pressed against me like water, thick and suffocating. By noon, I was lost. The trail markers I'd followed before were gone. My GPS refused to connect. Every direction looked the same, miles of pine trunks and moss. I tried to stay calm, retracing my steps, but then I heard it again, the whistle. This time it came from behind me, closer than before. I spun around, camera still hanging from my neck, and shouted into the trees. "Who's out there?" Silence. Then, after a long pause, another whistle. A perfect imitation of my own voice's tone and pitch, twisted into something mocking. The sun slipped lower, and the shadows stretched long between the trees. I kept walking, heart pounding, convinced I was being followed. Once or twice I thought I saw movement, a flash of pale skin darting behind a trunk, but when I looked, nothing was there. I called out again, more desperate now, and the forest answered with a chorus of low, soft whistles that echoed from every direction. They were all identical. That's when I realized there wasn't just one. Panic took over. I ran. The forest seemed to shift with me, rearranging itself. Roots snagged my boots, branches tore at my jacket, and still the whistles followed, sometimes distant, sometimes right beside my ear. They weren't taunting anymore. They were hunting. By the time I stumbled back into what looked like my original campsite, the sky was almost dark. My fire pit was still there, the coals cold. My tent half collapsed, like someone had trampled it. I knew I should have kept moving, but exhaustion and dread pinned me in place. I built the fire back up, its light flickering weakly against the darkness, and sat with my back to a tree. That's when I saw them. Shapes between the trunks, just beyond the firelight. Pale, lean figures standing too still to be human. Their faces were washed out, their eyes dark pits, their mouths twisted in faint, unnatural smiles. One raised its hand to its mouth and whistled. The sound was shrill, echoing through the clearing. Another answered, then another. The noise bounced around me, dizzying, until it was impossible to tell how many there were. I fumbled for my camera, switching to video mode, the lens shaking in my hands. Through the viewfinder, I caught flashes of them moving closer, drifting rather than walking, their limbs loose and wrong. I shouted again, something incoherent, but they didn't stop. The circle tightened, slow and deliberate, the figures flickering in and out of the firelight. Then one stepped forward, and for a moment I saw its face clearly. Its skin looked stretched thin over bone, translucent like wax. Its mouth puckered into a small, perfect O, and the whistle that came out of it wasn't made by breath. It was hollow, mechanical, as if echoing from a deep chamber within the earth. My ears rang with the sound. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, and the camera slipped from my hands. The fire flared suddenly, burning brighter than it should have, the flames twisting unnaturally high. The figures recoiled, just for a heartbeat, their shapes distorting in the light. I took my chance, grabbed my pack, and ran into the dark. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. The forest blurred into streaks of black and gray. My lungs burned, my ears filled with phantom whistles that seemed to weave in and out of my thoughts. I must have collapsed somewhere near the ridge, because when I came to, the sun was rising, and the forest looked normal again. Birds chirped, the air was warm. For a moment, I thought I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But when I looked down, the ground around me was covered in footprints. Dozens, maybe hundreds, bare, misshapen, circling me in perfect symmetry. I found my way back to civilization by afternoon, half delirious, covered in scratches. I told the rangers I'd gotten lost. They nodded, said it happens more often than I'd think. When I tried to show them the footage from my camera, I found the lens cracked, the file corrupted. Only one image survived a single frame, blurred but unmistakable. A pale figure standing at the edge of the firelight, one hand raised to its mouth. That was 2 years ago. I haven't gone camping since. I can't. Every night, I sleep with earplugs in. But even through them, I swear I sometimes hear it again, soft and distant, like a memory I can't bury. A single, sharp whistle drifting through the dark. And when I wake, I always find the same thing on my porch in the morning. Bare footprints, circling the house. They told me not to listen if I heard a woman's voice calling my name in the woods, but I didn't believe them, not until it was already too late. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 28, a school teacher from Charleston, West Virginia. I'd spent the better part of my summer break hiking different parts of the Appalachians, trying to get away from the noise of city life. The quiet was supposed to be healing, a reset. My last stop before heading back home was Seneca Rocks, a towering quartzite formation that juts out of the Monongahela National Forest like a blade against the sky. It's a place people call beautiful, almost sacred, but also whispered about in the same breath with stories too strange to dismiss outright. I'd heard those stories from an old man at a gas station in Elkins. He leaned in close when he saw my tent stuffed in the back seat and said, "If you hear her, don't answer. Don't follow. Just cover your ears and keep walking, no matter how much you want to." I laughed it off at the time. Witches were for campfire tailies, not for a rational man with a master's degree in history. But I can tell you now, with every fiber of my being, that what waits in those woods is real, and she doesn't need your belief to destroy you. I arrived at Seneca Rocks late in the afternoon, the sun already casting long shadows across the valley. The forest smelled of damp moss and pine needles, and cicadas droned endlessly like a warning pulse in the air. I set up camp near the base of the trail where most tourists hike, a little clearing not too far from the North Fork River. It felt isolated but safe, or at least as safe as sleeping alone in the woods ever feels. The first odd thing happened as the sky darkened into dusk. I was cooking ramen over my small camp stove when I heard footsteps, delicate, careful, but not animal. They circled the clearing just outside the ring of light cast by my lantern. I called out, assuming maybe it was another late hiker, but no one answered. The footsteps stopped, and for a long moment, the only sound was my own breathing. When I shined my flashlight into the trees, there was nothing. Just trunks, branches, and darkness, swallowing everything beyond a few yards. Later that night, I dreamed of a figure moving between the trees. Thin, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent the wrong way as it glided through the forest. Her face was hidden in shadow, but her mouth, God, I'll never forget that mouth seemed stretched too wide, lips torn or rotted back to expose teeth that shouldn't have belonged to anything human. She didn't speak, not yet, but the sound of wind through the leaves seemed to form words that tugged at the edge of comprehension. I woke drenched in sweat, my skin cold despite the summer heat. The next morning I tried to shake it off. Dreams are just dreams, and I told myself I'd been spooked by the old man's warning. I hiked the trails, admired the jagged spires of quartzite against the sky, even took a few photos. Everything looked normal in daylight. But when I returned to camp, I found something waiting. My campsite had been disturbed. The zipper of my tent was half open, though I know I'd left it closed. My gear was shuffled around, not stolen, just touched like someone had gone through it with curiosity. The dirt near the entrance showed prints. Not boot prints, not animal tracks, but bare feet. Long, narrow, bony feet pressed into the soil, circling where I slept. By the time night fell again, my nerves were raw. I sat by the fire, clutching a stick like it was a weapon, trying to laugh at myself for being paranoid. That's when I heard it for the first time. My name, Daniel. It was soft, lilting, carried on the breeze like someone whispering from just behind the trees. My heart seized in my chest. The fire crackled, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward me. Daniel, come here. I froze. The voice was female, low and gentle, but there was something wrong with it. It slid in and out of the sound of the river, as though it wasn't truly a voice at all, but a mimicry stitched together from the environment itself. I thought of the old man's warning and clamped my hands over my ears. My pulse thundered. She kept calling, sometimes nearer, sometimes farther, sometimes in front of me, sometimes behind. My name bent and twisted as though she was learning how to say it, stretching the syllables until they sounded alien. The fire sputtered and dimmed, the air turning colder despite the flames. I stayed rooted to my seat, rocking back and forth, whispering, "Don't answer, don't answer," until the voice finally melted into silence. I didn't sleep. The next day I debated packing up and leaving, but stubbornness kept me rooted. I told myself I'd come here for solitude, for clarity. I couldn't just run because of one night of strange noises. So I stayed, but the forest was different now. Every branch creak felt intentional. Every shadow seemed to lean toward me. The birdsong was scarce, replaced by long stretches of dead silence that pressed against my ears. That afternoon, I wandered farther along the trail than I intended. I came upon a grove of twisted trees, their trunks blackened as if burned long ago, though no fire marks showed on the ground. The smell there was foul like damp soil mixed with rot. I turned to leave and saw something etched into one of the trees, a symbol carved deep into the bark. It looked like a spiral with jagged edges, almost like an eye. Touching it filled me with nausea, like vertigo in my stomach. That's when I heard laughter. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere like a woman chuckling directly into my ears, though no one was there. I staggered back, tripping over roots, and when I scrambled up, I caught a glimpse of her, the witch. She stood between the trees, tall and skeletal, her tattered dress clinging to bones that jutted like broken branches. Her hair was a stringy, tangled mass that draped across her face, and her eyes, if she had any, were hidden beneath the dark hollows of her sockets. Yet I felt her stare, pierce straight into me. When I blinked, she was gone. I ran back to camp, breathless, my legs burning with panic. My tent loomed ahead, but something was wrong. The lantern inside flickered on its own, swinging though no wind stirred. The flap hung open, and from inside I heard my own voice whisper, "Daniel, come here." I didn't go inside. Instead, I collapsed by the river, trembling. That's when the air grew unbearably cold, and fingers thin, icy, impossibly long brushed against the back of my neck. I whipped around, but nothing was there. Just ripples in the river, moving against the current. I knew then that I couldn't stay. But when I tried to leave, the trail twisted. Paths I had walked the day before seemed to bend in on themselves. Landmarks vanished. No matter how far I went, I found myself circling back to the same clearing, the same campsite, as though the forest itself had become her trap. That night was the worst. I built the fire high, desperate for light, but shadows writhed just outside its reach. The voice came again, no longer soft. It was commanding now, seductive, dragging me toward the trees with every syllable. My name became a rope pulling tight around my chest. Daniel, Daniel, come to me. The air was thick with the smell of rot and sulfur. My ears rang, and I swore I could hear bones snapping in the darkness. Shapes flickered between the trunks, dozens of them. At first I thought they were animals, but as they drew closer, I saw they were people. Men, women, even children, their faces hollow and gray, their eyes empty sockets. Their bodies twitched with jerky, unnatural movements. They gathered in silence, circling my camp, and one by one they opened their mouths in unison. From them poured her voice. Come to me. I clutched my head, screaming, but the sound barely cut through theirs. I tried to run, but the figures closed in, their skeletal fingers grasping at my clothes, my skin. I felt nails scratch deep into my arm, cold burns spreading through my veins. Then she appeared again, just beyond the firelight. Her height was monstrous now, towering, her limbs too many, her face splitting open into a grin that stretched ear to ear. She extended one hand toward me, bones clicking like dry wood. The world seemed to collapse inward. My vision blurred, my body heavy as though I was being pulled forward. Every instinct screamed to resist, but my legs moved of their own accord. Her voice filled my skull, louder than thought, louder than life itself. And then, silence. I woke up at dawn, sprawled on the ground near the river, shivering, my fire long dead. My arm burned where the scratches had been, though no marks remained. My tent was gone. My gear, my lantern, even my pack, all of it, had vanished as if it never existed. The forest was still, too still, but bright with morning sun. I ran. I don't remember how I found the trail, or how long it took me to stumble back to my car, but when I did, I didn't look back. I drove until the forest disappeared in my rearview mirror, and swore I'd never set foot near Seneca Rocks again. But here's the part that haunts me most. When I got home and finally worked up the courage to check my phone, I found photos I don't remember taking. Blurry shots of the grove with the blackened trees. Images of figures lurking just behind me, skeletal faces half-formed in the shadows. And one final picture taken while I must have been asleep. It shows me, lying in my tent, with a tall skeletal figure leaning over me, her mouth inches from my ear. I don't know how I escaped. Maybe she let me go. Maybe I never escaped at all. Because sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear her again, whispering my name from the corner of the room. And each time, it gets harder not to answer. The first rule I learned at Blood Creek was this: never drink from the water after sunset. The second was worse: if you hear your name, don't answer. Don't look toward the sound, don't even breathe too loud. Just run. I didn't believe those rules at first. Now, I can still hear the water whispering my name every time I close my eyes. My name is Aaron Lowe. I'm a park ranger for the Kentucky Division of Forestry, stationed near the Red River Gorge region. I've worked there for almost 7 years, patrolling hiking trails, keeping campers safe, and, more often than I'd like, recovering bodies from the wilderness. Blood Creek isn't on most official maps. It's a narrow tributary that runs off the Red River, winding through a deep hollow where sunlight rarely touches the ground. Locals gave it its name long before I was born. They said the water once ran red after a landslide buried a camp of miners in the 1800s. No one ever dug them out. The story goes their souls soaked into the creek itself. I used to think it was just folklore. Every place like this has its ghost story, something to scare kids and keep trespassers away. But last autumn, I found out how wrong I was. It started with a call from dispatch on a cold October morning. 2 campers' brothers had gone missing near Blood Creek. Their car was found parked at the trailhead, tent still standing, gear untouched. No signs of struggle, just silence. I volunteered to check the site, figuring they got lost or wandered downstream. The drive out there took over an hour, winding through forest roads blanketed in fog. The air smelled like wet leaves and rust. By the time I reached the trail, the sky was bruised with clouds, promising rain. I radioed in, told dispatch I'd check in every hour, then started down the narrow path toward the creek. The woods around Blood Creek always feel different, colder, quieter, like something's pressing against the air itself. Even the birds avoid it. About half a mile in, I found the campsite. The tent flaps were open, 2 sleeping bags inside. A small campfire pit filled with cold ash. But what stood out were the footprints leading down to the creek, bare footprints. I followed them, each step sinking into the damp soil until I reached the water's edge. That's when I heard it. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. It sounded like someone saying a name drawn out, airy, almost human. I froze. It was hard to tell where it was coming from. The wind? The trees? No, it was coming from the creek itself. The water was moving strangely, rippling in small circles, even though there was no breeze. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. Aaron. I stumbled back. I hadn't told anyone I was coming alone. My radio crackled on my belt. A burst of static, then silence. I tried to tell myself I'd misheard it. Maybe it was the current catching on rocks. But deep down, I knew the creek had spoken my name. I forced myself to look into the water. Beneath the surface, I thought I saw faces. Just shadows at first, distorted by the current. But as I leaned closer, they came into focus, 2 pale faces staring up at me, mouths open in silent screams. The missing brothers. The next thing I knew, my boots slipped on the wet bank, and I plunged forward. The water was freezing, so cold it burned. The second I went under, everything went silent. No rushing current, no wind, no sound at all. Just the faces. They were right there, inches from mine, eyes wide, skin bloated and torn. Their mouths began to move, releasing bubbles that formed words in the water. Join us. I thrashed upward, breaking the surface and gasping. The creek wasn't deep, maybe 3 feet, but I scrambled out like I was escaping hell itself. My heart hammered in my chest. When I looked back, the water was calm again, black and mirror smooth. The faces were gone. I radioed dispatch immediately, but all I got was static. So I started back toward the trail, shaking, soaked to the bone. But halfway up the hill, something made me stop. The whisper came again. Aaron. This time, it wasn't from the creek. It was right behind me. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand, scanning the trees. Nothing. Then I noticed the fog had thickened around the water, rolling out like smoke. And in that fog, shapes were moving, slow, deliberate shapes. I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my face, my boots slipping in the mud. I didn't stop until I reached my truck. My hands were shaking too badly to start the engine at first. When I finally did, I peeled out of there, tires throwing gravel. I didn't stop until I hit the main highway. When I got back to the station, I told my supervisor what I'd seen. He just stared at me, then sighed. "You went near Blood Creek, didn't you?" I nodded. He told me there'd been stories for decades. People hearing voices, seeing reflections that weren't their own, finding animals drowned along the banks with eyes wide open. A few years back, a group of college kids camped near there. Only one came back half-frozen, incoherent, repeating the same thing over and over. "The water knows my name." I wanted to believe it was mass hysteria, some kind of shared delusion caused by the sound of running water. But when the bodies of the missing brothers surfaced 3 days later, I stopped trying to rationalize it. They were found downstream, faces twisted in terror, skin pale and waterlogged. The coroner ruled it accidental drowning. But here's what wasn't in the report. Both bodies were found clutching each other's throats, fingernails broken, as if they'd tried to strangle the sound out of their ears before they died. I should have quit right then. But the thing about curiosity, it's a disease. I couldn't sleep for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those faces beneath the surface. I had to know if it was real, or if my mind had broken. So against every instinct I had left, I went back. It was early evening when I parked at the trailhead again. The air felt heavy, like it was warning me away. The forest smelled different this time, decay, and something sweet, like rotting fruit. I followed the same path, the sound of the creek growing louder with every step, like it was waiting for me. When I reached the water, it was almost dark. The surface shimmered under the moonlight, red and black, like oil. I knelt down, hands trembling, and whispered, "What do you want?" For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the water began to ripple, slow and rhythmic. My reflection twisted, features melting, reforming into another face, one I didn't recognize. Then another, and another. A dozen faces, all whispering, their mouths moving in unison. "Aaron!" The sound wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside my head, vibrating in my skull. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The whisper grew louder, turning into a rush of voices, each one layered with the next. "Aaron, Aaron, Aaron." The sound became unbearable. The ground seemed to pulse beneath me, as if the earth itself was breathing. Then, for a brief second, I felt hands grab my ankles from beneath the water. I screamed and kicked free, stumbling backward onto the shore. When I looked down, there were wet handprints on my boots. That was the last time I ever went to Blood Creek, but leaving didn't stop it. The whispers followed me home. I'd hear them in the pipes when I turned on the faucet, in the hum of my shower, in the rain against the window. Always the same voice, soft and patient. Sometimes it would call my name while I slept. Other nights, I'd wake to find puddles of water on my bedroom floor, though the ceiling above was dry. The final straw came 2 weeks ago. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound I couldn't place, something wet and slapping, like water dripping in a sink. I got up, half asleep, and followed it to the bathroom. The sink was full. The faucet was off. And in the reflection of the water, I saw myself standing there, but my reflection wasn't moving. It just stared at me, smiling faintly. Then its mouth opened. "Aaron!" The water in the sink began to ripple violently, splashing onto the counter, spilling onto the floor. I stumbled back, slipped, hit the wall. When I looked again, the sink was empty. My reflection was normal, but now I know what the whispers mean. They're not random. They're invitations. Once the water knows your name, it doesn't forget. I've stopped showering. I drink bottled water, avoid rain, keep the taps shut tight, but it's no use. The sound is getting louder. Last night, I woke up to find muddy footprints leading from the bathroom to my bed, wet, bare footprints that stopped right beside where I sleep. And now, as I'm recording this, I can hear it again. Faint, just under the hum of the refrigerator. A soft gurgle, like water moving through pipes. Then, Aaron. The whisper is coming from inside the house. I think the water found me.